With the presence of Mai on SF6, there's a lot of people talking about her. Will she be top tier? Will she be fun to play? Was her visual design a good decision by Capcom and the developers? But what I thought when I saw her gameplay trailer was Capcom is really going all out using sexualization around Mai as a character, as a marketing strategy to sell her. And I don't know if this is a good or bad thing. I just want to discuss about it. So today we're going to talk about sexualization on fighting games. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing, and leave a comment. What do you think of this topic? Stay until the end because we're going to talk about many different fighting game franchises that use this as a resource for designing characters, and we're even going to talk about Japan and how its culture has an impact in all of this. So let's actually start with Mai. Mai, of course, is a very sexualized character. There is nothing to debate about it, okay? It's kind of like attached to her legacy as a character in SNK, and it's present on her costume, on the way she behaves, you know, on the way she talks, even in her gameplay. Is that a good or bad thing? I don't care. We're just gonna discuss about it and how it's present in the fighting game industry. And that is not the only type of media that uses sexualization to sell something. Like, the world is full of that. But there is a lot of interesting situations in the history of fighting games in which sexualization has been used as kind of like the main marketing strategy to sell a character or even a game. And it's really interesting. Now, for Mai, since she is, you know, the most recent case, if you go ahead and look at her gameplay trailer, there's a lot of different hints around sexuality that are very explicit in many ways. For example, in the description of the video, it says Mai from Fatal Fury promises to warm you up when she bounces into Street Fighter 6 on February 5. We all know what they are doing with this. Yeah, like, this is very clearly, you know, a double message. It's not only related to her using fire, okay? There is, of course, a lot of comments about sexualization around the character by fans, and even in her windscreen, she says something related to sexuality.
Hey, what are you looking at? Up here. So
it is very obvious that they are using it as a resource to sell you the character. And it's pretty crazy that it's present in the industry still. And we're going to move into other examples in the history of fighting games about sexuality that are also pretty crazy. Oh, do you happen to remember this pretty famous franchise called Dead or Alive? It hasn't had any new games, but the games kind of revolved around, you know, sexualized women. That was kind of like the main topic in many ways. And, you know, they just punch each other and fight on platforms, and yeah, just look at the screen, dude. I don't even need to explain this. It is very self-explanatory. So there was an entire, you know, fighting game franchise that literally stood in the weight of sexualization around women. Like, that is what kept the game alive. And of course, maybe a game or two had great gameplay. That is not the reason why people play the game. We don't even need to discuss it. And a lot of people want this game back. You know, they want this franchise to come back for the right or wrong reasons. I'm not going to discuss about it, but it is pretty insane to think that a whole industry or like a whole franchise in relationship to fighting games was built around sexualization of women. It's pretty insane. Another really interesting example is the Darkstalkers franchise, your 90s, you know, early 2000s fighting game franchise. And one of the main characters for it that was actually famous enough to even be present on Marvel vs. Capcom games was Morrigan. And do you know what Morrigan is? She is basically a succubus, which are, you know, kind of like these female demons that are present in folklore and different mythologies that suck sexual energy from men until they kill them. Succubus are actually pretty interesting, you know, as a mythological creature in philosophical and religious terms, but why do we need to choose that to make a fighting game character? It's not a coincidence. So it's pretty insane how sexuality has been used all over, you know, the history of fighting games to sell both the games and characters. There are, of course, more examples that are a little more subtle, and that's what we're gonna show you right now. Dead or Alive and Darkstalkers are kind of like on the extreme for examples, but what if we go to Tekken and talk about someone like Nina? Nina is a character that is sexualized, of course, but not on such a vulgar way as the other games, and it's kind of like more related to her style. It feels like it's more connected to a very specific type of style or aesthetic. It doesn't necessarily feel vulgar, you know, or like an exposition of a woman's body. It kind of like relates to her being cool, you know, and looking good, and that's it. It's part of her identity, but it doesn't necessarily mean that she's being exposed to men, you know, as a woman. And I think that that is very interesting because it is a conclusion or like a result of modern fighting games, of more modern character designs. And before we move into Japan and their culture and how that affects, you know, character design at the end of the day, I want to show Wireless character, which is King. You know, King to me is kind of like one of the most cool female character designs that is not overly sexualized. Like she's literally on a tuxedo and she's like super elegant, looks great, super cool, and she doesn't need to be overly sexualized to be cool. So that is a pretty interesting character that is actually kind of old, that was already, you know, designed on a more modern way, in which the important thing is not sexualization, is how cool a character can be and look. And then we move into Japan, you know, a country that has a very rich history, incredibly interesting philosophy, architecture, and a country that is also beautiful, that has very fun media also. Who doesn't like, you know, a guy with a giant Gundam costume? But of course, Japan also has a very overly sexualized media, and you can see it on anime, you know, on fighting games, which is what we are talking today. And in any case you don't know, anime is one of the most successful media industries in the world right now. Like Japanese anime industry producers have been incredibly successful in the last few years. And anime is a very over-sexualized piece of media. And we can also move to another industry in Japan, which is also really successful. And if I'm not mistaken, it is even illegal, and that is prostitution. Prostitution is an immense business in Japan, and it is not a coincidence. Again, it feels, or it seems like in some way, sexualization, you know, fetishes and many other things related to sex life are present on Japanese culture. And the way in which all of this translates, you know, into fighting games is that at the end of the day, Japan's entertainment industry in general embraces themes of sexualization, you know, like prostitution, porn, hentai even. And at the end of the day, if fighting games are being produced in this country which embraces this type of culture, and also the audience for fighting games is a male dominated demographic, why wouldn't we be selling games and fighting game characters through over sexualized characters? As I said at the start of the video, of course, male characters tend to embody like power fantasies, you know, this like overly muscular man that fights the evil or whatever. And female characters often lean more into fan service, you know, and basically overexposure of the female body. And I don't know if these trends are gonna change. We don't know if over the next years, female characters are going to be less sexualized and are going to be more focused on a specific style so that they look cool. At the end of the day, this video is not for discussing the morals and ethics around it. I just wanted to put the topic out there because I feel like it's incredibly relevant still up to this day in fighting game marketing, and at the end of the day in the industry of fighting games. And it is a pretty interesting topic to both discuss and analyze because it feels like it's been part of the full history of the genre. So if you enjoyed the video, please consider again giving it a like, subscribing, and leave a comment. What do you think of the topic? And see you on the next video, guys.